Is that recording? Yes. All right, just so everyone's aware, we are actually recording this session. If you want to go over it later, it'll be available, or if you have any questions, please feel free to contact me. Hopefully this is useful and interesting for people, and if not, then I apologize for wasting your time. But thank you for coming. What I'm basically going to talk about today are some techniques that I use and others use to basically help you become more personally productive. So there's a lot of stuff out there about, things to basically become more efficient at this and do better at that. And most of it is really geared toward how do you become a more efficient worker? How can you get more stuff done over the course of the day? Things like that. These techniques kind of apply to that, but really what I'm talking about is personal productivity, like the ability to breathe over the course of the day because you're not constantly being bombarded with stuff, the ability to basically relax a little through the course of your workday. The techniques that I'm presenting today can be applied at work. They can also be applied in your personal life, and there's a ton of literature out there about other stuff similar to this. I've picked a few specific things that I do that I thought was worthy of sharing that might be of interest to people. But there's a lot more out there. And again, what I'm going to end up doing is really just giving a high-level overview of stuff. If you have more questions, please let me know. And I'm excited to talk about some of this stuff, so I'd really like to get into it with you. Today, I picked 4 specific things that I do, 4 specific techniques that I want us to review. So the first one is called mind mapping, which people may or may not be aware of. It's essentially a way of taking notes in a non-linear fashion. You can do it either manually using pen, paper, that sort of thing, or you can use it digitally. So what I'm doing here, this whole presentation, is based on a mind map. And the idea there is that you have a central idea that you're exploring, and you basically, as you think of things, you add them to the mind map and create different hierarchical relationships between them to kind of understand at a more detailed level what's going on, but you have the ability to kind of abstract out at a high level. So, if I basically do this, we can see that we have a very high level. Okay, well, there's going to be an intro, it's going to go over 4 techniques, and we've got some resources. But if we expand everything here, you can see that there's a lot more information that basically is going to be explored, and because it's not all being displayed at once in this digital form, it doesn't become overwhelming, but when you need to access it, it's there. And so, talk about mind mapping. It basically was popularized by a gentleman by the name of Tony Buzan. He has a book called The Mind Map Book, which is excellent, and I highly recommend it for anyone who's interested in this technique. And again, it's about tracking your thoughts in a nonlinear way. A lot of people, myself included, thoughts come kind of in a very scattershot, random type of way, which makes it really hard to track in, let's say, a traditional outline format, because you don't know where that's going to be later. But by using a hierarchical structure like this, you can just kind of throw things in, you can rearrange them, you can do stuff like that when you're at least doing it, through digital methods. So it's great for brainstorming, miscellaneous thoughts and notes, and one of the other interesting things that happens is as you're actually mapping things and mapping what the hierarchy is, you'll actually get insights as to relationships between aspects of whatever it is that you're talking about that you may not normally see. So I wanted to show a couple of examples what mind maps might look like. So these are for people who might use pencil and paper and kind of maybe be a little bit more artistic. Again, you have a centralized thought. You kind of have what relates to it, and as you get smaller here, you can see that these branches get smaller and smaller. Those are more detailed. And it's a really interesting way of tracking information. It's also a really good way of remembering information. It's easier for us as humans to remember what an image is and different pieces of an image than maybe a linear list of thoughts and ideas. So this is one technique I use. I used to have a lot of manually created mind maps a few years ago. I've kind of stopped doing that. But whenever I'm doing like a presentation like this, or I'm trying to put my thoughts together for a proposal that I'm writing, whether it be work related or not, I usually start with a mind map to get everything down on paper, and I can just kind of add things as they come up, and it makes it really easy to organize things later. So here's another example here. And for people who are creative, the ability to add this sort of artistry to it is actually very appealing. It's a good way to do that. So anyway, that is the first technique that I want to explore. So it's the concept of mind mapping. The idea is to basically collect your thoughts using a centralized idea and gather everything around it. So that's the first one. And I mostly was showing this the last time I did one of these lunch and learn presentations. It was around time box versus feature boxing. I actually did the presentation through a mind map. There were a lot of questions around, well, what is that? How does it work? So I wanted to explore that a little bit today. The next one that I want to explore is something that different people are going to have different thoughts as to how well this works. It's using scripting and macros over the course of your daily life. We all do things that are repetitive. We either deal with JIRA tickets that are of a particular type. Maybe we write emails constantly. Maybe there are certain things that you're constantly giving information to other people about. And so you can kind of look and break down the various things that you do all the time. And even though they're small, if you become very efficient at them, you basically can speed up your time. Now, here's a good example. Let's say that I was in JIRA, right? If I wanted to find, let's say, the details of CP 12345, what most people would do is they would call up an instance of JIRA, they would come in here, and they would just retype CP 12345. Not 565. And then pull it up. And I timed this to figure out how long does it take me using this to call up a ticket in JIRA. And on average, it took me between 10 and 15 seconds from between when somebody would basically give me a number and when I would go through this process. And that depends on JIRA being running and do I have to launch a new browser and all kinds of stuff like that. And I realized, and this was several years ago, that I was looking up JIRA tickets literally hundreds of times a day. Like, emails would come in, I'd have to find things, people would ask about a specific ticket. And one of the tools that I've been exploring using was something called AutoHotkey. And this is basically a scripting language. It essentially allows you to map keystrokes to do certain other actions, and there's a bunch of other stuff that you can do too. But what's nice about it is if there's a little bit of a learning curve, but if you take a couple hours to kind of figure it out or, get advice from, some more technical people, you can do some really impressive things, like just highlight something, give a single keystroke, and have JIRA pop up for you. Or if you don't have it and, somebody's asking me, okay, so you want to know about CP 13245, if I can type things right, 3245, and it pops up right away. And what I found was that looking up JIRA tickets to me is about 3 to 5 seconds now, as opposed to 10 to 15 seconds. Now, this doesn't seem like a lot, it may seem kind of stupid, but when you do it every day, continuously, it is actually a huge thing. And I find that people who see me doing this get interested and they want to understand how. So again, the tool that I used was AutoHotkey. Essentially, I've written macro scripts to do various things like this for me. And where's my things? So I do a number of things this way, and I'm not going to get into all of them. But simple things like an email citation. Like every email I start off, good morning, Josh. Well, typing good morning, Josh was taking me a while because I'm lazy. So now I type Josh, I hit Windows G, I have a script that goes out, figures out what time of day it is. If it's before noon, it'll say good morning. If it's between noon and 6, it'll say good afternoon. If it's after 6, it'll say good evening. All these sorts of things, and it just does that for me. Again, they're kind of neat. They're little stupid things. But there are also things where, I often give, very lengthy explanations as to why we do a particular process a certain way. It usually goes out to a large group of people. And at the end, I really need to ask, okay, does anybody have any questions about this? So one of the things I was constantly typing is, please let me know if there are any questions or concerns. Well, now I type QC/ and it's all done for me. These are the sorts of things where, it was worth it for me to take maybe a day or two to figure out what are all of the stupid little things that I'm doing constantly like this, and how can I optimize them. And after I spent a day or two figuring them out, I found that my life works much smoother than it used to before. And this is basically an idea that I kind of wanted to pitch to people. So things like, thanks, Jason, good morning, any sort of phrase that you use constantly. Another one that I found that was useful for this, and again, I'm pitching the specific tool of AutoHotkey, is I actually found a library somebody else had made of the top 500 typos that people make over the course of their life. And I literally put this in my script, so if I basically type something like TEH instead of THE, I don't have to worry about it, because when I hit the space button, he's going to fix it, right? And so I don't know if a lot of you, does anyone here remember Marnie Mistel? She was one of our writers. I used to work with a different Marnie, and her name had an E at the end, but our Marnie didn't. And she used to get really pissed off at me every time I mistyped her name. So I actually set up a macro, so if I mistyped her name, oh sure, it doesn't work now, make a liar out of me. Yeah, I killed it because she quit. But stupid things like that. And it was great because it's, basically write once, run anywhere. For me, I also use some sophisticated tools like Dropbox so that my AutoHotkey scripts actually work both on my work computer and my home computer. They come from a common source, so if I make an update to one script, it'll basically apply across the board. This is something that I personally have found to be incredibly helpful with the daily things that I do. I highly recommend people look into it if they're looking for a way to be more efficient. That being said, those are really my AutoHotkey examples. Viewing CP tickets, good morning, all that stuff. I actually use it. I even will have macros to create Jira tickets for me. So if I want to clone verification tickets, I'll have a macro that does a lot of that work for me. And again, it's to keep things consistent for me and kind of take my mind off of what I actually have to do. For those of you who may have, experience with batch files and things like that, there are a lot of things that you can do. It can be very helpful. For instance, I constantly am downloading things from the web, and particularly when I use VPN to access Centene's network, it always downloads all these stupid little things that just kind of live around my desk and gets really messy. Well, I now actually have a batch file that runs on a daily basis and goes through my downloads directory and clears anything out that's older than 3 days or whatever. So using these sorts of things to just kind of maintain my computer eases me from having to remember to do that. So those are examples of the sorts of things that you can do. Like, for instance, I used to have icons on my desktop all the time because when I downloaded stuff, I always dumped it on the desktop to look at it, and I was always too lazy to throw it out afterward. Well, now, once an hour, I have a batch file that clears everything off my desktop, sticks it in a folder, and then I can go through that later and just delete everything, for instance. So that's the second technique that I wanted to explore. So we talked about mind mapping, the use of scripting and macros to kind of help with daily life. Another thing that I find is really helpful, that I've used this a lot, is coming up with a prioritized to-do list. Some people do this with pen and paper. My wife actually has this really interesting method that she uses. It's got all kinds of symbols and stuff, and every day she moves things from one page to another in a notebook, and that's kind of how she manages the to-do list. I've seen people around the office using notebooks that have a lot of great information where they kind of maintain all of their notes as they're going day to day. I myself use a digital to-do list, which I'll actually pull up for you now. And what I have here, if you guys can see it, everything work-related that I have outstanding is here. Because I can drag and drop, I can alter the priority of whatever it is that I'm working on. There are a lot of studies that basically indicate multitasking and context switching is actually a very bad thing in terms of productivity. Really, what you want to do is find one thing to focus on, get that thing done, move on to the next thing. A technique like this, using a prioritized to-do list, easily allows you to basically prioritize the things that are outstanding for you and determine the order in which you should address them. And by maintaining this, every time something comes up for me, I use this as my one trusted method. If somebody tells me, oh, I need you to do this, and it's something I can't do immediately, rather than forcing myself to remember for the next 3 hours or 3 days or whatever what it is, I will go to my to-do list, make sure that I put it down, put it prioritized appropriate way, so that whenever I basically have free time to do the next thing, I can always look at this list and know what's next. Now, I have multiple lists here. Some of you may know I do roller derby, I do some other stuff here. I keep separate lists here, so when I know I'm working on roller derby stuff, this is what I need to work on. When I'm working on work stuff, this is what I need to work on. And I basically have that in a prioritized fashion, so the most important things are always getting done first. Now, this system, in and of itself, doesn't really accommodate things like meetings or things that are time-specific. So if you read, there's a book called Getting Things Done by David Allen. It explores a lot of things around personal productivity. And the method that they basically advocate is you use your calendar kind of as your Bible. Whatever your calendar says you're supposed to do, that's what you should be doing. And so you manage your calendar very tightly, which include things like scheduling time for lunch breaks, scheduling when you leave the office, scheduling meetings with other people, but also carving out time to say, oh, I'm going to spend this hour working on my to-do list. And what you do then is for any given point in time, you can look at your calendar and understand exactly what it is that you're supposed to do. Now, micromanaging everything on your calendar is unreasonable. If you have a lot of little minutia type tasks that might take 2 to 5 minutes, you don't necessarily want to put them all on your calendar. Then your overhead of trying to manage it exceeds the level of effort to actually do things. But having something like a to-do list where you just kind of jot things down really quickly, this is what I need to do, and carving out larger blocks of time to be able to do that, that allows you to manage your macro things, your meetings with managers, your specific Scrum meetings every day or whatever, and make it work in conjunction with things that aren't necessarily scheduled. The important thing here is knowing that your to-do list is always in the correct priority fashion. If you have control over your own priorities, that's a very easy thing to do. If you don't have control over your own priorities, this is a communication thing you have to do with whoever the stakeholders are who help determine your priorities. But ultimately, you want to be working from a prioritized list, so you always know this is the most important thing that I need to work on right now, and I'm going to do it until it gets done. So again, I use Trello. It is a multi-purpose board. I use it primarily for my to-do list. There are a lot of other tools and techniques out there, including pen and paper. But I do strongly recommend that people learn how to use a daily to-do list, or in this case, electronically. I just have one constant to-do list that I keep putting things in and out of, and it helps you kind of keep things under control. So that was the to-do list. Let's see. Yeah, that's that. The last thing I wanted to review is Inbox Zero. So is everyone aware of what Inbox Zero is, what the goals of Inbox Zero is? So, okay. Inbox Zero, the whole idea is that people misuse email often. So email is designed really as a communication mechanism between individuals or sometimes groups of individuals to basically be able to communicate not in real time, right? So I want to send you a letter or whatever. Well, email's faster because it'll get delivered to you quicker, but you have the ability to determine when you're going to read, what you're going to do with it. But email really can easily get out of control. Jira, for instance, will send emails for any tickets that you're watchers for. Confluence does the same thing. I'm sure many of you in this room are on a ton of email lists and probably get in the order of hundreds to maybe even thousands of emails a day. I have very aggressive filters to get rid of emails that I don't want to bother reading. I went on vacation for a week. When I came back, I had something like 600 emails in my box, but those are only emails that actually include my name in them because I basically kill everything else. On an average day, including Jira subscriptions, and granted I'm a watcher on a lot of tickets that I don't need to be watchers on, but I will easily get 3,000 to 4,000 emails. Now, that being said, there's no way I can reasonably read all of those. I have seen a lot of people in this office who literally will have 7,000 to 8,000 unread messages in their inbox. And that's great, except how are they ever going to read those 8,000 messages, right? We don't know what's in there. They're not going to know what's in there. And reasonably speaking, they're never going to get through it. The idea of Inbox Zero is a lot of people will use email as the to-do list. Oh, I'll keep this email around because that'll remind me to do this or that or the other thing. Or they'll use it as a file storage system. Okay, I'm going to just keep all of these attachments there. And your inbox gets so cluttered that it's difficult to actually use your inbox as it's originally intended, which is this is where I receive communications from others who let me know what's going on. So the idea is to get your email inbox to 0 items every day, or try to live with it constantly. Like I basically go through my email probably 3 or 4 times a day, and by the time I get through my email, I want my inbox to be empty. Now that doesn't mean I just trash everything all the time. I'll archive things that are important, but I have different categories of what email messages are. Some things might be actionable. These are things that either I need to reply to right away, or maybe I need to, spend more time thinking about it before I respond. I have things that might be informational that I need to basically keep for reference reasons later. There might be things that I look at I can delegate to other people, in which case really my action needs to be to forward it on to the appropriate people. So here's the basic summary of what the process is, right? For any given email that comes in, you're going to do one of these 5 actions. The first one is, do I even care? Can I just delete this? Spam is a great example of that. There are a lot of automated messages that I get about build procedures. If I can see that a build was successful, I don't care about it beyond that point. I'll just delete it right away. Other items might be things that I can delegate. There might be a question that's posed to me around what's the compatibility of this version of TrueCare to this version of ProAuth. And maybe that's not my level of expertise. I'll know, oh, I need to delegate that to this product manager. So I'll just take that, identify who the product manager is, forward it on to them. Some items I can just respond to. It's a quick response. Hey, you want to go out to pizza later today? Yeah, sure. Boom, done. Get it out of my inbox because I've already taken care of it. Other items identify tasks that I need to do that can be deferred to a later time. And this is kind of, it seems really stupid, but this is a big mental leap for me. I realized I didn't care about the email. I cared about what the email was asking me to do. And I had my trusted system of the to-do list. So all I needed to do is when I read this email, is add an item to my to-do list, figure out where it falls in priority, and then the email goes away. And then there are other things that you basically are able to do right away. So those are really the 5 categories of things that come in through email. And once you've trained yourself to deal with it, you basically can get through a whole bunch of emails and get your email box clear. And so the whole idea is that once your inbox is clear, your mind basically can focus on other things, the important things, like web browsing or whatever the case may be. But you don't have to think about all the stuff in your email clutter box because you know that it's in a trusted system. And because it's in your trusted system, you're dealing with it in the correct prioritized fashion. So since I started adhering to this inbox zero philosophy, I found that my life is a lot less stressful than it used to be. So it's something that I basically wanted to share with people. That being said, that's the fourth of the 4 techniques I wanted to share today. There are a couple of resources that I recommend for people. There is the book, Getting Things Done by David Allen. This basically talks about a lot of the concepts that we went over here, including the importance of the prioritized to-do list and things like that. It's it's a fairly light read. It's not really too deep, but it's probably something that I think a lot of people would find useful. There's a podcast called The Get It Done Guy. His name is Stephen Robbins. He basically is very funny to listen to. His podcasts are probably about 8 minutes long each. They explore different techniques, not necessarily the things that we talked about today, but people who want to basically increase their personal productivity. That's something that I highly recommend. And I think that's all I had to yammer about. So I guess I'd like to ask if anybody has any questions or thoughts.
Yeah, WC question.
Was that the
WC question?
Yes, right. No? Anybody on the phone?
Hey, Jason, this is Srini. I got a question on AutoHotkey.
Yes.
So have you or anyone used it to automate tasks on TrueCare, TrueAdmin or TrueClient?
To automate, like logging into TrueCare, for instance?
Right. I mean, every release, yeah.
So, let me explain briefly what AutoHotkey actually does. So essentially, it is an application that will send keystrokes on your behalf as if they've been typed into a keyboard. So any sort of applications that you can control purely from the keyboard, let's say with hotkeys, you can use AutoHotkey to work with. So if you were, let's say, to do something with, let's say, TrueCare admin login, you can set it up so that once you have TrueCare up on your browser, you could hit a specific hotkey sequence, and it could basically tab through to the login field, type in your name, tab to the password field, type in your password for you, tab to the submit key, and press enter on your behalf. So you could do that in a single keystroke rather than basically typing everything out. And that does work. I've done that in the past. I haven't really done a lot of work directly with the application recently, so I can't say if my old macros would still work, but it's certainly something that's doable.
Yeah, I've done basic tasks, but beyond a simple task of logging in, it seems like it's pretty complex if I have to. So every release, most of the developers have things to do that pretty repetitive, and being able to go click on a menu item and things of that nature. I've had some issues trying that. So I was just wondering if anybody can share the code, a sample code that they've done successfully to perform this task.
I'm just the comments on the chat window, which points will be.
What's that?
Can you open the chat window?
Are there comments?
Yeah.
So Claude references Wiki, right?
Yeah.
Is there a Wiki page?
Yeah, like Alex created the media around it.
There you go.
Here we go. Have you seen this page, Srini? I wasn't even aware of the fact that this page existed. So
Yeah, me neither.
all right.
I'll toss one out. Another one out there comes from a company where you lose faster to edit than type. Is the whole thing, but one of the things we did is Windows shortcut keys. They're definitely going to speed up your life. For example, Windows E brings up Windows Explorer. Windows L locks your computer. You're supposed to be doing.
Yep.
Well, a few others out there. Say 3 rubber mouses for either mouse.
Well, and I'll just say, I know you can't see this on the phone, but I absolutely love my mouse. I have the Logitech MX Master, and the reason I love this mouse is that it has all these hidden buttons all over the place, which I basically then map the hotkeys. And because I now have control over what all my hotkeys do, it really, you know, like, for instance, like this popping up. Oh, thanks, Alex. You know, all of this is driven by AutoHotkey, right? So even this menu, I take all of my common web shortcuts, let's say, and I'll basically use this as a mechanism to go see whatever pages I need to see. I can also, you know, quickly close tabs and actually reopen tabs based off of existing hotkey shortcuts. So because I've taken the time to kind of figure out, oh, Windows L will lock my screen, this will close this, I've mapped them through AutoHotkey where, oh, when I do this, I want this sequence of keys to execute, and then I'll basically map the initial hotkey to something on my mouse to make things quicker. But again, how much time you can gain by doing these things is going to vary. And actually, that's one slide I forgot to show. Let me kind of pull this up. So is it worth it? Like this is, I don't know how many of you read XKCD, but they actually did a really interesting chart that I actually keep at my desk, which is saying how much time do you shave off of a task, how often do you do it, and what does that convert to in your total time saving over the course of 5 years? But this is kind of a, some things are absolutely worth optimizing, and some things are absolutely not worth optimizing. And, you know, you can easily get yourself stuck into a place where it's like, oh, I really want to make this work, and then you spend 3 days trying to save yourself 5 seconds on something that you're going to do a dozen times. But you don't want to do that. So, all right, anything else? I think we're ready to wrap up. Is there any questions, Ruby? Is there anything?
No, just the questions that you have.
Okay. Oh, I think there was another chat message that swung by.
Okay. Does anyone on phone have any questions?
All right.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
I almost like, feel like Sherlock Holmes.
See my Gmail icon?
Oh, nice. So you're not an subscriber to the Zero Inbox?
I am.